Hi class, my name is Devona Garrett-Smith and I'll be narrating for you my Team Performance Management System graduate research project. Racism is deemed a social construct that was created to divide the human race into classifications based on ethnicity. This creates an environment that lacks inclusion, diversity, and equal opportunities. Starbucks, who is known for their coffee branding, had been in the media surrounding issues related to race in April 2018. America is a melting pot of different class and ethnic backgrounds. While there are people who claim to not see color, this is impossible because we all look different. Some people have melanin and some don't, thus deriving the color differences among people. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 was passed with the hopes of making life fairer for people of color. However, the incident at Starbucks proves there is still work to be done. For the context of this paper, the research student would like to enhance the 360 peer review process and customer comment cards currently used by Starbucks for their frontline store employees in an effort to help identify where racial bias may exist and identify where corrective action is needed within the organization. The objective of this paper is to discuss 6 components of the performance management process through goal setting, rating scale and ranking systems, evaluation performance review document, feedback and evaluation, and issues that can affect the success of this process. To analyze Starbucks as a 21st century global troubled company whose image was questioned as a result of racial bias, the purpose will be to illustrate how the elements of performance management can help to mitigate this risk in today's social climate. To tie in the importance of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and its relevance today, to implement a strategy as a part of Starbucks 360 peer review that will help bring about awareness of racial bias and discrimination in an effort to reduce occurrences, and use scholarly reviewed references to support the students' views on what it means to be inclusive in the corporate culture. Starbucks Company Overview. Started as a single store in 1971, located in historic Pike Marketplace in Seattle. Company name inspired by one of the main characters in Moby Dick, first mate of the Pequod. 1982, Chairman and CEO Howard Schultz joined the company and later visited Italy, was captivated by the Italian coffee bars, and had a vision to bring this concept to the U.S. Schultz, along with local investors, purchased the company in 1987. Timeline of accomplishments, but not limited to. 1988, they had a total of 33 stores and offered full health benefits to eligible employees. 1990, their mission statement was unveiled. 1991, they became the first privately owned company to offer a stock option program, and they opened their first licensed airport store. In 1992, they had a total of 165 stores and completed their first initial IPO. 1995, they had a total of 677 stores and began serving Frappuccino blended beverages. In 2000, Starbucks had a total of 3,501 stores and obtained a licensing agreement with Transfer USA, which allows them to sell fair trade certified coffee in the US and Canada. 2008, they had a total of 16,680 stores and restructured their mission statement that reads, "To inspire and nurture the human spirit, one person, one cup, and one neighborhood at a time." 2011, there were a total of 17,003 stores, and they opened community stores in Harlem and Crenshaw neighborhoods. 2014, there were a total of 21,366 stores, and they launched a campaign committing to hire 10,000 veterans and their spouses. In 2018, there were a total of 29,324 stores, and the company was faced with image crisis for racial bias and closed stores for racial bias training. Company overview continued. In terms of products, Starbucks sells at least 30 blends and single origin premium coffees. They house various handcrafted beverages such as iced and espresso drinks, Frappuccino, Starbucks refreshers, and other non-coffee drinks. Consumer sales of branded coffee and tea merchandise, and the selling of various types of food such as breakfast, lunch, snacks, and sweet treats. Starbucks' values are creating a culture of warmth and belonging where everyone is welcome, delivering our very best in all we do, holding ourselves accountable for results, acting with courage, challenging the status quo, and finding new ways to grow our company and each other, being present, connecting with transparency, dignity, and respect. For the culture of inclusion, Starbucks states that they have inclusion, equity, diversity, and accessibility is a value and is respected, and employees are treated with transparency, dignity, and respect. Let's take a look at Starbucks' 2018 year of transformation. The company reached double-digit growth of $24.7 billion in top-line revenue, which was an increase of 10% over the prior year. They had an unveiling of an initiative to modernize the Starbucks experience that will focus on convenience, comfort, and connection. They're looking to promote acceleration, innovation, and new retail through a $100 million investment with Valor Siren Ventures. They recognized their 30,000th store opening, and they confirmed the company maintained equal pay in the U.S. regardless of race or gender, and equal pay in China and Canada for gender. Let's take a look at the timeline that led up to the Starbucks racial bias training. On April 12, 2018, a video goes viral of a Starbucks employee in Philadelphia who called the police on two African American men who were assumed to be trespassing. April 14th, separate investigations are launched by the mayor's office and police department. Starbucks offers apologies and promises to take action that will shore up their in-store practices. April 16th, protests in Philadelphia begins, the cafe manager leaves the company, and another video goes viral of an African American man in California who was denied access to the restroom. April 17th, Starbucks announces that 8,000 stores will be closed on May 29, 2018, for training for an estimated 175,000 employees. The company does damage control and releases an interview statement from CEO Kevin Johnson. April 18th, the two Philadelphia men were identified as Rashawn Nelson and Dante Robinson. 911 audio is released confirming that manager Holly Hilton did not warn the men she was calling the police. Gayle King interviews Howard Schultz, the executive chairman of Starbucks, on CBS, who stated he was ashamed of the incident. April 30th, Starbucks felt the Anti-Defamation League, as part of the racial bias training, would serve in an adversarial fashion and decided to drop this from the curriculum. May 2nd, Starbucks offers full tuition to both men for studies at Arizona State University. And on May 29, 2018, Starbucks stores are closed to conduct the 4-hour training session, that featured a film by Stanley Nelson. This estimated cost of this initiative was $16.17 million. Starbucks performance appraisal process. Performance appraisal is a process in which an employee's performance is assessed through a performance management system within an organization. The criteria is as follows: formal annual exercise of supervisory roles to evaluate subordinates, summative in the narrative of the performance, evaluation of the level of performance, provides ratings and an overall assessment of performance. It is a tool used for HR to make decisions about salary change, promotions, and or layoffs. Starbucks uses an objective approach for customer comment cards shown to the right as one measure to evaluate employees, their service, and Starbucks products. In some locations, employees who score greater than 70% of 100 are monetarily rewarded for this feedback. Starbucks also uses the 360-degree feedback for frontline employees and some managers as their performance appraisal process. Goal setting process. Goal setting consists of two components: clearly defined goals and the way in which they were measured to assess the accomplishments. The evaluation of the accomplishment of goals. What is SMART? There are attributes that define what is to be accomplished and the metrics used to evaluate if said goals have been met based on the criteria below designed to provide direction in reaching performance goals. The first one we have is specific. It defines an observable action, a behavior, and or result. Is it measurable? It's the start and finish of a defined goal. Is it agreed upon and achievable? Employer and employee buy-in on all goals. Is it realistic? Practical in nature based on the work being performed. And is it time-bound? Is there time allotment for reaching said goals? Rating scale and ranking system. Rating scales are a simplistic way of obtaining qualitative measurements for job performance through graphic rating. Although it may save time, it does not clearly define the performance being measured of what the levels being rated means. There are two types. Behaviorally anchored rating scales defines the dimensions and meanings of levels through behavioral terms, while also creating employee buy-in because the scales are derived from colleague feedback. Behavioral observation scales provides the ability to rate performance based on the frequency of how something is seen. Ranking system focuses less on ratings and more on ranking employees. The intent of this methodology is to remove the ability to inflate the overall performance rating. Evaluating performance. The design of the evaluation performance is based on contextual influences that set the tone for circumstances occurring over a period of time, giving words to performance through an appraisal system. There are two types of context to consider. Distal, which is the indirect relationship to the performance and are represented by the internal and external organizational environment. Proximal is a direct relationship to the performance and how employees are rated. Starbucks' philosophy is to remain committed to living out the principles established for evaluating equality, diversity, and inclusion. In January 2019, the company released a coveting assessment which includes but is not limited to the following below, but failed to mention how to measure these principles through the performance review process. Building engagement with law enforcement, strengthening their diverse workforce, creation of an anti-bias curriculum with Arizona State University. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 was passed to end the Jim Crow era that resulted in the unfair treatment of Black or African American people. It prohibited unequal application of voter registration requirements, racial segregation in schools, employment, and public accommodations. Feedback and evaluation. Feedback and evaluation is used to provide information about job performance and has three components as outlined. Comes from an external source, it's performance related, and intended for improved performance. However, the perception of the delivery will determine the effectiveness. Performance review document. Starbucks uses the 360-degree feedback for all levels and a customer comment card for external reviews of employees and the storefront. By definition, the 360-degree feedback is also known as a multi-rater feedback tool that allows for self-evaluation and feedback from subordinates, colleagues, and supervisors that is relevant to job performance based on behaviors and tasks. The purpose of 360, there are various theories surrounding this purpose, but not limited to training indicators, performance appraisals, merit increases, enhancement of team effectiveness, and identifying high and low performers. Strengths identified is that the 360 promotes increased raters and ratees' contact strength. Raters feel empowered by the ability to rate their boss. Various sources of feedback establishes more reliable information that ratees may be more receptive to regarding performance. A few weaknesses identified is that it makes it easy for raters to choose raters who they have positive relationships with, and implementation costs. Starbucks uses the 360 peer approach to review the performance of frontline employees, which consist of baristas, which are responsible for providing customer service with taking and or making orders based on customer preference, handle various currency types for payment of service, and assist with fielding questions and complaints. Barista shift supervisors and managers are responsible for supervising, delegation, and training. Assistant and store managers are responsible for training, store human resources, product control, safety, and financial performance. The company deems the 360 review is effective since each store operation has 9 employees who have close relationships and are comfortable with providing feedback related to job performance. Performance review document continued. Starbucks will need to consider the best strategies that will address racial bias and discrimination in the current climate by translating the business ethics of inclusion and equality to the legal aspect of the same by considering the following. The company is in compliance with their corporate principles, but this must be translated to the legal aspect as defined by the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Many believe that racism no longer exists and that race should not matter. Conducting the racial bias training is a start. However, this needs to transcend to the culture of the storefront by implementing this as a part of goals. Ensure that each store has an intergroup contact cooperation that helps to reduce prejudice. How to incorporate racial bias and discrimination into the current 360 review process. Increase customer contact beyond the purchase by engaging in conversation on the floor with customers, to include recommending a completion of the customer comment card that is universally tied to incentives and scorecards. Implement peer-to-peer checks and balances that identifies and promotes equal level of service and fair treatment of customer concerns, such as, are guests greeted the same? Were guests served in the proper order? Is management providing equal opportunities to underrepresented groups and minorities? Are employees creating a culture of inclusion through actions? Is there evidence of social exclusion among peers and our customers? Issues affecting the success of the process. Implementation of diversity strategies may result in the blatant or direct backlash of reverse discrimination or the display of the open opposition to inclusion. Display of less obvious forms of implicit bias. Challenge of deeply rooted stereotypes can result in negative results that may hinder a forward movement. Trigger of negative stereotypes that may lead to the adverse treatment of a minority class. The dominant class may view those represented for inclusion as competition, thus increasing biasness. Judge's assumption that the corporation's structure for diversity addresses inclusion and achieves a manner that addresses civil rights complaints. Now let's discuss limitations and recommendations. 2 limitations identified are the ability to change one's view of people through the lens of color, explicit bias, and implicit bias. Corporations checking the box of incorporating inclusion into the culture, but not aligning it with the need for understanding the relevance of the Civil Rights Act for today. Recommendations would be for Starbucks to promote through advertising the barista to customer on the floor interaction, to bring awareness so different cultures do not assume they are being targeted. Closing down 8,000 stores represents approximately 27% of the Starbucks Corporation, which is not enough to solidify a message of inclusion. Spend the money to expand mandatory closings to the remaining U.S. stores to show a commitment to the importance of this issue. Expand their corporate involvement to historically Black colleges and universities by corporate sponsorships for annual football classics, offering of scholarships. Take a public stance to discuss the importance of racial inclusion and how it should not be tolerated by becoming a part of the movement equality through local and national marketing and advertising. Replace the paper copy of the customer comment card with an electronic version. Offer a store kiosk and survey option link to the Starbucks app to be monitored by a third party to increase transparency for where bias and discrimination may exist within stores. Conclusion. The Civil Rights Act was passed in 1964, thus resulting in a legality that required equal treatment of people. However, time, in many cases subsequent to and ongoing, have proven that society has found other ways to infringe racial bias against people of color. Some bias, but not limited to, are driven by racism, news, and social media coverage of what is deemed to be a way of life for people of color, cultural conditioning, and ignorance. These various components will remain at play in the 21st century workforce as it relates to interviews, decisions to hire, and to promote within an organization. Corporations play a major role in the treatment of others, Starbucks incorporating a no tolerance to racial bias into the performance review process will bring awareness to those behavior in the current climate and further support the CEO's position regarding employees and customers, how they are viewed and treated. Bridging this gap requires the support from everyone, and this means putting a name to what happens in today's culture. Holding people accountable is the first step in bringing about a change, and corporate America can pave the way through actions and not just the legal verbiage of equality displayed for employees and customers to see. Hi, class. This concludes my research project. I look forward to your feedback. Thank you for your time.